Welcome to the GavGoesIn podcast. How we all doing? Waking up this morning, seeing Arsenal out of the Champions League. I have to say, guys, what a day, what a night, should I say? And as I said yesterday, if I'm Arsenal, and if I'm the fans, I'm questioning Mikel Arteta, because I think there's a lot of divide in that fan base. But honestly, I think Arteta has failed. And how long can he keep going at Arsenal, not winning anything, But he's going to be the next season. And the problem is, can you see anything changing for Arsenal? I can't. So, that's on them. But as I said, the right team for me, PSG, won yesterday. And them in the final against Inter Milan, it's looking like it's going to be a very good contest. And I'd have to say PSG definitely are the favourites for me, But yeah, it is what it is. Big up to Avedra. No worries, man. As I say, if you want to give it a watch back in your own time, by all means, man. But no worries. As I said, I will normally try and do my streams just so you're aware. So I will normally try and do the streams if Man United are playing, say they're playing Europa League, then I'd normally do them at 10 o'clock straight after the game, 10 p.m. And then my normal streams, I try and do them about 12, half 12 normally. But if there is a time that you want to tune in and you'd want me to make it slightly later or earlier for yourself, then just let me know, man. I will try and cater if it means that you can try and get it live. But yeah, big up yourself for coming on. So just want to talk about Ruben Amorim, and there were some quotes I think last night on. All right, man, cool, no worries. There were some quotes on Bruno Fernandes. I mean, I haven't seen the whole quote. I mean, if anyone's got the quotes, make sure you put them in the live chat. But Ruben Amorim seems to think that Bruno Fernandes is definitely going to stay. For me, the quote was along the lines of, Bruno staying, and he's adamant on that. The thing that I want to look at is the fact that Amorim has the nerve really to say that Bruno is staying. Amorim is not even Amorim can't be 100% confident that he's going to be staying, because as I keep saying, it's all well and good him saying he wants Bruno to stay, and for obvious reasons. Bruno's his compatriot. Oh, there we go. So let me just read it out. So Bruno is our captain. I will say it again. He's a player that will stay. We will do everything for him to stay. Now, for me, that's just an obvious quote that the manager's gonna say. I don't expect Amorim to say, we're gonna sell Bruno at his earliest opportunity. Obviously, Bruno's his captain. And obviously, if he was to say Bruno's gonna leave, that's gonna obviously devalue the player anyway. So the quotes that he's saying is not really surprising. The problem is for me is that Amorim is coming out with these quotes, but he isn't 100% certain that he's going to stay. Because as I keep saying, if he doesn't win this Europa League and the league season that United have had, how can Ineos possibly keep him at the club? And these are the kind of things that I want people to be aware of, because it's all well and good Amorim saying that he wants Bruno to stay, but you're not 100% certain of staying there either. So I just thought it was a bit odd that him coming out with that, which is obviously he's going to defend his player. But Ineos need to be looking at the fact that he isn't doing a good job, and he has a chance to win a trophy. And if that isn't to happen, then I wouldn't. If I'm Ineos, why would you possibly keep this guy in charge? And I think as well, everyone seems to think that, Amorim is definitely going to be there next season. And for me, I'm not so sure. As I said, I think the Europa League's a massive factor in this. And if he doesn't get over the line, I don't think it's a question of, are you going to sack him? He has to be sacked. It's just the obvious thing to do. Big up Daniela Iacona. Yeah, big up for coming on, Daniela. So as I said, yeah, like I just think that it's kind of like, a bit brazen from the manager to come out with these quotes, even though, as I said, he is going to defend Bruno because obviously, you don't want to devalue the player by saying, he's going to leave or we have to see at the end of the season. So he's going to be adamant that Bruno wants to stay. And obviously, if it was down to Amorim anyway, Amorim is going to want Bruno to be at the club. But for me, yeah, as I said, he's on thin ice for me, Amorim. And he isn't a certainty to stay at this club. And again, Ineos need to be looking at this for sure. Big up to Agnes 14ish. Yeah, big up for coming on. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say, guys, in regards to the quotes from Ruben Amorim, because as you guys already know, I'm done with Amorim, and the fact that he's so brazen to come out with them comments, I think, unless he's been told that he's definitely gonna be there next season, I think it's a bit odd that he comes out, that confident that Bruno's not going anywhere when he's not assured of himself being there. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. Big up to Nix Alpha. Big up to Barbara Joseph as well. Yeah, big up for coming on. But guys, moving on. Obviously, Man United have got the Europa League semi-final tonight against Athletic Bilbao. 8 o'clock kickoff. For me, there's no excuses. United, for me, will go through. I think being 3-0 up, in the first leg, going into the second leg at home, Athletic Bilbao missing arguably their 3 best attackers. There's no excuse for Man United. And I want United to go on the front foot as well and bury Athletic Bilbao. I think if United can get the early goal, as Athletic Bilbao's heads will drop, and United just need to go and kill the game off early on. But on the other hand, if Bilbao managed to get a goal in the first 10 minutes, let's say, I think they'll for sure fancy their chances, and it's going to be down to Man United to try and see the game out for me, But as I said, there's no excuses tonight, I expect United to comfortably beat them at home, I would say, because I think when they're missing their the 3 most potent goal scorers, I think there's no excuses for Amorim really. But I think what I would say, their striker, I can't remember his name. I don't know if he's Algerian or Moroccan. I think their striker could cause problems. The central striker that played last time, he's a bit of a hit and miss player, but I think he might be a bit of a handful for Harry Maguire and the defence today. So I think he's one player that United will need to keep an eye on. But as I said, I do think United have enough to kind of see the game out anyway. Exedra says he's likely to stay, Gav. I'd be surprised if Ineos sack him. It will be an admission of failure. Yeah, do you know what, Exedra? I agree. It would be an admission of failure. But I'm looking at the fact that, they sacked Dan Ashworth, so they're showing that, if things ain't right, they will act. And I for sure, with Ineos, they can't be happy with what's going on at this club, If they're satisfied that United are in the Europa League semi-final with a potential game in the final, and the fact that, United are 15th in the league, if they're happy with that, then fair enough. I'd be a bit surprised if they are. But for me, and I think the way that Ineos have been ruthless, I just feel that if he doesn't get the job done in this Europa League, I don't think they're gonna just stick with him because I think they would be confident enough in themselves to say, look, we gave him a chance, we thought he was the guy, and ultimately he's proved us wrong. And I don't think they would really care about the admission of failure, because I think these guys are businessmen, and they've probably made they've made a lot more tougher decisions than sacking Ruben Amorim. So for me, I don't think that they're gonna keep him because it's an admission of failure. I just think that these guys are ruthless businessmen, and they'll do what's needed. You know, when you're sacking staff, you know, I don't think there's anything that's off the table. And for me, as I said, I think Amorim just needs to get over the line in this competition. You know, the league season's been an absolute disaster. You know, but this Europa League is going to be the savior of the season for Amorim. And as I said, I think yeah, there's no excuses for this. You know, so 100% we should be smashing them this game. I'd like it to be a humiliation, but these players and this manager are not capable of it. I agree, and as I said, I'm going to go into the lineup that I think he should play in after I've gone through the chat. But for me, most importantly, Man United need to start on the front foot. You know, if Man United think that they're 3-0 up and they're going to allow a Athletic Bilbao to come onto them and invite pressure, that could be the wrong thing. So United, for me, need to go on the front foot and attack them and give them something to think about, because there's no way a Bilbao are going to come to this second leg and sit back. So Man United need to counteract that with playing, for me, as many attacking players as possible. You know, and as I say, you know, defense is the best form of attack. Or is it the other way around? Attack is the best form of defense. You know, so for me, they just need to just put a lot of attacking players on the pitch and give Athletic Bilbao something to think about. And again, they're missing arguably their best centre back in Daniel Vivian as well, who got sent off in the first leg. So yeah, they're missing 4 players who are all starters for them. So there's no excuse for me. We'll have to wait and see. So Zedro says they didn't sack Ten Hag, but it's true that it was under Dan Ashworth who got sacked. Yeah, listen, the Eric Ten Hag one was an absolute joke, and I think this is why I believe that Ineos are gonna act on Ruben Amorim, because they probably look at the Ten Hag one as a waste of time, waste of money, and they won't make a second mistake. So, you know, people are saying that Amorim is Ineos's guy, and to an extent, I think when they brought him in, they probably thought, you know, we're bringing in a young coach that is going to get the best out of the current team, and then obviously prove himself to get better players. He's failed on every front there, and the only thing that's keeping him alive is the Europa League. So, as I said, I think they would have learned a lot from Ten Hag. And the fact that they sacked Dan Ashworth, someone that they were chasing for a little while, and the fact that, you know, they paid money to get Dan Ashworth out of Newcastle, I think these guys are going to be ruthless if they need to be. And we're gonna have to just hope that it is the case. You know, as I keep saying, for me, I don't really care if Amorim wins Europa League or not, because I've seen enough that, you know, he hasn't been good enough since he's come here. And the Europa League shouldn't be a trophy that just hides, you know, the failure of the club for this season, regardless of if he hasn't got his players or not. So I would just sack him if I was Ineos. But he, as I said, he might have a case in Amorim himself, if he wins the Europa League, to say that, you know, he's brought him a trophy in his first season. So that would be the saving grace. But as I said, if Ineos are serious, you know, they will just look at the season as a whole and think that United win or get to finals regardless of the manager, and Amorim's performance hasn't been good enough. So yeah, they should be looking at getting rid of him. That's what I truly believe, you know. But again, we'll have to wait and see, as you said. Big up to I Am Titanium. Big up to Kenneth J. Bone. Big up Latin Gamer. So I Am Titanium says he would keep Ruben. Again, I think there's quite a few fans that would, but you need to ask yourself, you know, regardless of the players that, you know, Ruben Amorim supposedly hasn't got, has he done a good job? Because for me, United getting to the Europa League final with the team that they got is expected. You know, obviously, they still got one game tonight, but it is expected for them to get to the final. What I would ask you is, has Amorim improved any player? You know, is his system working? Because I keep hearing that, you know, the system, you know, is a system that Amorim thrives in, you know. And again, if I'm Amorim, I would have at least I mean, how he's not at least coached at least one player to work in this system is unbelievable, really. And again, a lot of these players, people say they have low IQ, but I would have expected Amorim to at least have one player that is doing well in this system. There ain't one player that thrives in this system, which again is a coaching issue, because if Amorim's meant to be this top young coach, why is there not at least one player that's thriving? There's not one, So, as I said, yeah, like I know people want to keep him, but for me, he can only realistically have a chance, not with me, but with others, I would say, if he wins the Europa League. Because I think if he fails in Europa League, I don't see why anyone would say he has a chance. He deserves his chance to stay. You know. So Gamer says, I give Ruben unless United want to be chasing title ASAP. Yeah, for me, I don't see Man United under Amorim going for any title. As I said, I've seen enough of Amorim, and it isn't because he hasn't got the so-called players to play in the certain positions. What I look at with Amorim is that it's his profiling of players in playing them in certain positions and the players that he seems to rate. That's what I'm looking at. Because if I could see he was playing the players, who are the better footballers, and playing them in the right positions, I'd be more enthusiastic and more complimentary of Amorim. But the fact that he's doing a similar job to what Ten Hag was doing in terms of the players he picks, the players that he rates, this is why I don't think he's going to be a long-term manager at Man United, because, again, no manager is going to be given 9, 10 players, and he hasn't earned the right. So we have to wait and see if what he does in this competition. And as I said, if Ineos do give him the players, let's say if Ineos give him 5 or 6 players, then again, Amorim will do a better job than what he's doing now, because you can't not do a better job if you're getting new players, 5 or 6 players that are good players coming into the team. But that doesn't mean that Amorim's actually doing a good job. It just means that the club have given him 5 or 6 players. But my thinking is, you need to earn the right to get more players. And quite clearly, for me, he hasn't earned the right to get more players at his disposal, because he isn't doing a good job with the ones he has, So I Am Titanium says he needs a pre-season. Yeah, but to do what? Because, as I said, he hasn't earned the right to get a pre-season for me. I think the pre-season talk is an excuse for his failures, As I said, since he's came in, I've not seen anything where I can say, yeah, Amorim deserves another season. He deserves his players. I've not seen absolutely anything. I think he's collected a total out of 24 points from a possible 70-something points in the league, which is poor. As I said, Man United are unbeaten in the Europa League this season. But I expected Man United to go all the way to the final with the squad they've got. And again, a lot of it isn't because of Amorim. It's because the players have just turned up when they needed to, And he better hope that this team turn up in the next 2 games if they get to the final, because, he could be out of it, and rightfully so, Big up to DXR. So Gamer says, if he ends up losing tonight, I would sack him tonight. Obviously, can't see that happening, but football's mad sometimes. Yeah, again, I agree. If he loses tonight from being 3-0 up, Ineos just need to pull the plug in the dressing room. Just pull it in the dressing room, because this season has been unacceptable. And again, if they're 3-0 up and he bottles this lead, it's unforgivable. But again, I don't expect Man United to lose tonight. They are capable of it, because the season's been a complete write-off. But for me, being 3-0 up and then the other team having 3 of their best players or their 4 best players out, for me, there's no excuse. So yeah, I don't see United losing tonight. So they will be in the final. And again, he's got 1 game really to prove his worth for me. And it all comes down to that 1 game against whoever's, if it's going to be Tottenham or Bodo Glimt. So yeah. So Gamer says, if he wins the cup, I'd give him a chance for 3 months, see how he does. Yeah, again, but this is where Man United stands are dropped, because I've never known Man United to be well, I say I've never known it. I think it was under Ten Hag it started. Man United are used to getting to finals, used to winning cups. That's the philosophy of the club, that's the standards of the club. So I don't see that Amorim winning a Europa League as a chance for him to stay, because his bread and butter, which is the league, he's failed in since he's come in. Because how can Man United be fourth in the league? 4 points off a top four, and then he's taken them all the way down to 15th, and people seem to be happy with that because they're saying the Europa League is more important for financial reasons. Yeah, which again I do hear, but it just shows you how much the club has dropped, because again, regardless of the financial reasons, Amorim being in the Europa League and getting to the final and winning it, they should just sack him, because this is not what they brought him in for. Surely not. If they said, look, we're bringing you in to win Europa League and nothing else, then again, he's achieving his objective at the moment. But if they brought him in to keep them in the race for the top four or the top five, and try and get a trophy, then he's failing at least one of them, and it's all on the Europa League. And for me, I don't think the Europa League is enough for him to keep his job. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, exactly, Evedra. He's had Exedra, sorry. He's had 25 plus 30 plus games to prove himself, and I can't remember. I think he's got what? Is it 12 wins, 6 lot? No. Is it? If anyone's got the stats for Amorim's season, put them in the chat, guys. But I think he might have 12 wins. I think he's got 24 points or something like that from since he's come in, which is poor. From a possible 72, I think it might be. And again, United have got West Ham on the weekend. And if West Ham was to win that game, United drop down to 15th. And then again, Tottenham are playing, and if Tottenham happen to win their game, then United drop to just above the relegation places. So, you know what I mean? And it's unacceptable for me. So, again, I don't want to hear people saying, United are throwing games because there's bigger things at stake. The season as a whole has been a complete write-off, and the fact that people will seem to be satisfied because he's in a Europa League semi-final, it's a chance to give Amorim, his flowers. It's nonsense to me. But this is what it is, unfortunately. Right, guys, I'm going to just go through just quickly. I will come back to your chats afterwards. So I'm just going to go through. So I've got a couple of things to talk about as well. So yeah, if you just joined in late, Ruben Amorim has said that Bruno Fernandes is definitely staying. Again, I don't know how he can say that when his job isn't secure itself, And again, if anyone thinks that if Saudi come in for Bruno Fernandes and offer what's rumored to be 120 million, if there's anyone in this chat, and again, guys, you can disagree with me if you want, but if there's anyone in this chat that thinks it's a good idea, Man United, to reject that bid for a 30-year-old that's going to be 31 in September, I don't know what you're smoking, because I would take anything above 50 million for Bruno. A guy that's on 300 grand, 50 grand a week. He's turning 31. For me, he's a detriment to the team. People would look at his GA and think that he's a savior for this club. He's actually a detriment to the team, because again, he's hogging everything and is taken away from the actual team. His GA is at the expense of the team. And again, this system that United play, he's not ideal in any situation, in any position. He's not good in the 10. He's not good really as a 6, and he's decent as an 8. But I think for this system, personally, if Man United are trying to go through this system with this manager, then they need to buy specialists in them positions. And if Al Hilal are dumb enough to come in and offer 120 for a guy that's going to be 31, Man United have to just take that money and run, because what they can do with that money and what they can do in terms of bringing in a Kobe Mino, making him a bit more of a forefront in the team. You know, again, this system doesn't get the best out of Kobe Mino, you know, just like many other players. But again, if anyone thinks that Bruno Fernandes should be staying, if Saudi offer 120 mil, you know, I advise you to go to the hospital and check yourself, man, because some of the stuff I've been hearing is just absolute madness. You know, he is someone that you just cash in if anything upwards of 50 million comes in for me, because how fans see this player, you know, is surprising, and it's just ludicrous, really, because this is a player that is just a good player, but they go on as if this guy invented football. You know, he's just a good player, you know, that gets numbers at the expense of everyone else. And again, guys, I want people to implore that these numbers are a complete lie and they're a complete joke. And it's what these stat people don't tell you. So the fact that Bruno, they talk about Bruno's GA and his chance creation. First and foremost, the chance creation comes from, you know, he's on every free kick, every corner, and penalties. So no matter how the ball is put into the box from a corner or a free kick, if a Man United player happens to get their head to the ball, that counts as a chance created for Bruno Fernandes. Yeah? If he plays the ball to someone, like a 1-yard pass, and then they take on a player and get a shot off, that counts as a chance created for Bruno Fernandes. You know? But again, these are the things that these people don't tell you. Unless you're actually watching the game properly and seeing what's actually going on, you wouldn't even be rating GA from a player like this, you know, because performance is more important than GA. You know, I use the example of someone like an Andres Iniesta, who is one of the best midfield players of his generation. You know, even you look at Zinedine Zidane, for instance. These guys average what, 5 or 6 goals a season, but no one cared because we just knew how good these players were on the ball, how good, how better they made their team and how better they made their team play. But all of a sudden, you can get a guy that gives the ball away countless times, gets GA, and then this gets highlighted as being something positive, you know. And again, this GA, what has this GA done for Man United as a whole since he's actually come to the club? Because I'd argue that he's been a problem for the club in terms of his ill discipline in the midfield. I remember when he first come to the team, because I think United had Jesse Lingard playing in that midfield position. You know, I think it was a case of Bruno coming in, and it was more of a they've got like a new toy, a lot of these fans. And if you watch the games, Bruno was getting numbers, but look at the amount of times he was vacating the midfield. You know, leaving the likes of Fred or McTominay at the time who were playing to go and do his work, because he was vacating the midfield to go and get numbers. You know, again, something that a lot of these fans don't really want to talk about, because it's all about praising Bruno, because they can't see nothing bad this guy does, you know. But as I said, if Ineos are serious, they'll just if this bid comes in for Bruno, I don't want to hear about, you know, these and ahhing, you know, should we take it, should we not? You accept that bid, you know, get his wage off the bill, you know, and reinvest that money into the club, you know, and go in a different direction. Because as I said, there's no surprise how since Bruno's come to the club has been in its worst state since he's been there, you know. So as I said, United just need to just do right by the club, and again make some club signings rather than signings for the manager, you know. And as long as the departures go, starting with Bruno, if this bid does come in, you know, that would be a good start to move on. But going on to tonight's lineup, guys. For me, as I said, I think United need to start on the front foot, you know. So for me, the team I would play, again, Andre Onana in goal. No surprises there. You know, Onana's got his detractors, you know. I don't think Onana is as bad as what a lot of people say. You know, I do think there's other pressing issues in the team that need to be sorted out. But again, he's someone that divides opinion. And whether Man United can get an upgrade on him remains to be seen. But I do think United do need to get a keeper that can push him and eventually overtake him. You know, but whether that happens in this transfer window, we'll have to wait and see. The three at the back, again, it's quite an obvious pick for me. Lenny Yoro, right side centre back. There's no Matthias de Ligt, so obviously Harry Maguire in the middle. And on the left side, if we're looking at balance, you know, you've got Luke Shaw, but I think Victor Lindelof will play there, or they might play Lenny Yoro on the left and Lindelof on the right side of the three. And again, you'd expect those three defenders there to have enough to deal with Bilbao's attacks, you know, for sure. I think the fact that United are 3-0 up, he's going to play Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo. For me, I would play Casemiro and Bruno in there, because I do think that... Sorry, he's going to play Casemiro and Ugarte, but I'll play Casemiro and Bruno. The reason being, I think United need to go on the front foot and attack Bilbao and get an early goal. And then if it's a case where they want to shut up shop, you know, you bring on a Ugarte to defend the lead. And I think that's the way he needs to go. But at home, I think he might try and put Ugarte with Bruno to try and... with Casemiro to try and stem the flow of Athletic Bilbao and just, you know, try and block off anything that they've got to offer. But I think if United show intent and go and attack from the get-go, that'll be a better tactical move in my opinion, really. But I think he'll go with Ugarte, Casemiro, but I'll go with Casemiro and Bruno in there. The two wing backs, again, it's going to be Patrick Dorgu and Mazraoui. I think Mazraoui's back fit now, so he'll definitely play. And again, Mazraoui's a welcome addition. I don't think Ahmad will start. I mean, I'll start Ahmad every game, but I think the fact that Ahmad's came back from injury and United are 3-0 up, I think I'm not too fussed if Ahmad starts on the bench for this one, because the last thing United want is Ahmad getting another injury. And I think if Man United wasn't 3-0 up in this leg, I think there's more. I think Ahmad starting wouldn't be a problem, you know. But I think the fact that Ahmad's just coming back and you don't want to risk him really, I think I'm cool with him starting on the bench for this one, and then obviously him coming on later on in the second half. So yeah, I think it'll be Dorgu and Mazraoui, and then the front three, or the two tens and the striker. So for me, I'd play Kobbie on the left, and then you got Garnacho on the right, and then Højlund as the striker. And again, let's get it right. You know, these are the only options that United have. You know, he's not going to play Eriksen. And would I start Eriksen? I would give him a game, but I'm not going to bother saying that Eriksen should start, because this manager's not going to do that. So the three he's going to play he's not going to be Kobbie for me. I think he's going to play Bruno left 10, Garnacho right 10, and Højlund, and then play Casemiro, Ugarte. But me personally, I would play I would play Kobbie left, Garnacho right, and Højlund. If everyone's fit, you know, and I'm talking about if Ahmad and Xerxes, again, the front three that I'll play will be Ahmad on the right as a right 10, Xerxes as a striker, and then Kobbie as a left 10. But again, United having to go with what they've got. So yeah, Garnacho as a right 10 if we're resting Ahmad. I'd play Kobbie as a left 10 and Højlund as the striker, because there's no one else, you know. And I think the team that he's going to go with is more or less what I've said. You know, as I said, he's going to play Højlund, Garnacho, Bruno, Ugarte, Casemiro in the midfield, Dorgu, Mazraoui, Yoro, I think Lindelof will get the nod ahead of Shaw, and then Maguire and Onana in goal. And I think that team there is more than capable of beating Athletic Bilbao, or at least getting a positive result against them to take them into the final. And again, there's no excuses for me for Amorim. Amorim just needs to get the job done, get to that final, and then, you know, if it's against Tottenham, you know, United will be the favourites for me. I know Tottenham have got United's number, but I think the fact that United have players like a Casemiro, that is a perennial winner, you'd expect them to have enough to get over the line against Tottenham if it is them in the final. But again, we're going to have to wait and see on that one. But guys, that just brings me on to Garnacho. So I think there's been some talk about, you know, obviously Garnacho, obviously in the summer, is going to be a big issue, because for me, I don't want to see this guy here next season. You know, so many people say that Garnacho's young, you know, he's got a lot of potential, all this crap that you hear. At the end of the day, you know, he's 20 years of age, and it's okay that he's 20 years of age. He isn't the level that Man United need going forward, because, again, if Man United just get a couple of attackers, you know, his place is in jeopardy and he becomes a bench player. And I think the ego of Garnacho won't allow that. So if there's money to be got for Garnacho, you just move him on. And for me, there's been talk about him wanting a new contract, you know, and the fact that I'm hearing this is even more likely for me that he's going, because if Ineos are trying to keep the wage bill, you know, in order, Garnacho's what, on 50 grand a week at the moment? And again, if he is to stay, he's probably going to want a new contract, which again, I don't, that can't happen. Yeah. So for me, if he's on 50 grand a week and there's been rumored that Kobe wants 150, I can see Garnacho asking for something similar, you know, and I would, you know, I think I've got confidence in Ineos to say that, you know, there's a player there that really isn't good enough. We can get money for him. And if the fact that he's going to ask for more money on his contract, it's even more the reason to get rid of him, you know, because as I said, if Acuna comes in, if a Eze comes in, or a Ryan Cherky, you know, or any other player they've been linked with, Mbuemo, Kudus, whoever, Garnacho becomes fifth choice player on the bench, fifth choice player in the lineup. So why are you keeping someone like that where you can get money for him and isn't good enough anyway? You know, so yeah, for me, I can see him being moved on, but you know, we can't really be certain because, again, we just don't know what Ineos are thinking. But I think Ineos are gonna surprise a lot of people this summer, because a lot of the players that the fans, you know, want to stay, I think Ineos are looking past that and looking for, you know, how can they shape this club to being better in the future. I do believe that, you know, and as I said, I've mentioned these three players plenty of times: Garnacho, Højlund, and even Bruno now, because there's been talk of the Saudi. If you can get those three players that, you know, are hyped by a lot of this fan base for some reason, if those three can be moved on for various reasons, then I would say, you know, Ineos are finally getting it. That's what I would say. But again, we have to wait and see. But yeah, I wanted to just touch on that. You know, Garnacho is possibly asking for a new contract if he's to stay, and for me, that can't happen. You know, and United just need to just make sure that, you know, that they're doing the right thing and removing these players. So yeah, in the summer, man, it's gonna be interesting, but we'll have to wait and see what's going on. Should go through some of the comments, guys. So we can only judge him for what we see now. Amorim chose to accept it and is currently getting paid for it. If he really had a problem, he'd be walking. Exactly. I think, you know, Amorim, if Amorim was told what his objective is, you know, I think he would have been told, you know, what money he would have had coming in as well. Because I don't believe he just showed up to the club with no idea of this, you know. And again, if the club had lied to him about this, as a man, you'll just say, look, this ain't for me, you know, regardless if you're going to be giving away money or not, because you will get another job. So I think Amorim knew what he was coming into, and unfortunately for him, he isn't doing a good job, and that's just what it is. Regardless if anyone wants to say he hasn't got his players, etc., he isn't doing a good job, and his saving grace is this Europa League, which he has to get himself over the line, you know. So yeah, but I agree with that. He isn't doing a good job. Gamer says, I didn't know he took the job when he was in top 6 on the table. What position were they in when Van Nistelrooy left? So again, when Van Nistelrooy left, United were 4 points off of the top 4. I think someone in the chat might have answered it already, but I'm just going through what's the latest things anyway on there. But United were 4 points off a top 4 when Amorim came in. And again, Ineos would have brought Amorim in because he's a young coach, one of the best young coaches in Europe, and they would have thought that he would have been someone to get them over the line and confirm themselves in the Champions League places. The fact that he might do it the other way around still gives him a lifeline, but there's no way that Ineos would have predicted this for United season. So, as I said, he's failed in that sense. And as Gamer said, you know, where were they when Van Nistelrooy left? They were 4 points off a top four, and look where they are now. So they'd have been better off just keeping Van Nistelrooy. That's the truth, you know. So they're just, yeah, so exactly 3 or 4 points off the top four. So I Am Titanium says anything under 100 million, I would reject the offer. Again, I don't understand this. Like, anything under 100 million, you would reject the bid for Bruno. Bruno's going to be 31, you know, and this offer that's incoming, United are not going to get this offer again for Bruno Fernandes, you know. And Bruno Fernandes isn't no sort of saviour for Man United that they can be rejecting any 100 million, you know. As I said, you know, there's been players that have left before Bruno. There'll be players that will be left after him, and players that are a lot better players as well. So the fact that you're saying, I Am Titanium, that you reject anything under 100 million, is where the problem lies. And again, if this was to happen, that United reject the offer, I don't want to hear people saying, oh, you know, if only they took that Bruno money. Because, you know, you have to look at the vision of the club. You're going to get 100 million, which, again, I can't believe that Man United are actually, that Al Hilal actually want to bid 100 million for a player that's going to be 31, you know, or even 120 million I've been hearing. But again, anything under 100 million, if it's 80 million, 90 million, take that and run. Because you're not only going to get the money in, you're getting his wage off as well, which will allow Man United to spend further. So I don't really understand people saying that they wouldn't accept anything under 100. You know, I would say anything, you know, between 50 and 90 million. You know what I mean? I think that's doable, because you got to look at his wage. You know what I mean? If he was on, let's say, I don't know, 100 grand a week, 150 grand a week, and they offered 50 to 60 million, then I'd be like, yeah, you want probably a bit more than that. But he's on 300 grand a week, 350, I think that's been reported, and they want to offer 100 grand, 100 mil, take that and run, or anything just under that. So yeah, United's Prem record. So 12 wins. No, is it 6? Is that 6 wins? Oh, sorry, 6 wins, 6 draws, and 12 losses. That is absolutely disgraceful, you know. 6 wins, 6 draws, and 12 losses. And the funny thing as well, a lot of them draws that United have got should have actually been losses as well, if I remember. FA Cup, yeah, so 2 wins and a loss. Europa League, 7 wins, 2 draws. Carabao, 1 loss. Yeah. So Mofo Show says, why does every British dude take soccer more serious than their own life? Don't know where you're getting that from, but you know, if it's not for you, man, then you're not forced to be here. It's just football talk, man. It's just debate. It's what life's about, man. Debate. So yeah, ex-players rate Bruno highly. Again, this is because these ex-players are clueless, a lot of them, you know. If you look at the likes of who we have to listen to on the TV a lot of the time, you know, there's a reason why these guys are in the studio a lot of the time. The likes of Gary Neville, Roy Keane, Ian Wright, you know, these guys are not managers because they'll be failed managers anyway, you know. Or Gary Neville's proof of that. He's a failed manager. But these pundits rate Bruno because Bruno's one of the favourites of the media. And this is what I'm trying to tell you. You know, you have your own mind and you know, don't listen to what a lot of these commentators and a lot of these pundits say, because there's no pundit that can make me rate Bruno Fernandes highly, because I've seen too much football. I've seen too many good players to know that this player is massively overrated, you know. And as I said, he's just a good player, you know. But the way they talk about him, they think he's special, and he's nowhere near special. And he's only a good player for Man United because for some reason the club have decided that he's the one that they want to play through, and everything is on his shoulders. He's the captain, he's the penalty taker, the free kick taker, the corner taker. You know, he's obviously on the highest wage as well. You know, whoever sanctioned this nonsense, you know, needs to be seriously looked at. And again, there's no surprise. And again, it's not all on Bruno, but there's no surprise why the club are in the state they are in, because they're trying to hang their hat on the player that isn't really good enough. You know, and that's the actual truth. Yeah, Amorim can say he's not leaving all he wants, but as I said, if this Europa League isn't won, then I think Ineos will have something to say about that for sure. Because I don't know a manager that can blatantly say he's not leaving and think he's calling the shots when the season that they've had in terms of the league season and they haven't won a trophy yet. So the Europa League is his saving grace. So Exedra says, thing with Bruno is I'd allow him to stay if he doesn't do his foolishness by playing in the 8. His best attribute is his engine, and he can make best use of that in the 8. Yeah, his best position in this system is the 8. There's no doubt in that. The problem is that, as I've said before, this formation that Amorim plays, I'm not really a fan of it anyway, if I'm honest with you. You know, I much prefer seeing the 4-3-3 or the 4-2-3-1. And, you know, if you'd have to believe that if Amorim was to get sacked, you know, I don't believe Ineos' philosophy is playing three at the back. I think this manager is just hell-bent on playing that. So for me, Bruno in this system as an 8, you know, that's where he plays better. The problem is there's better players that will play in this system in that position. You know, I done a set on Carlos Baleba, if anyone's seen my previous content. And I think Carlos Baleba, for what the attributes that he has, you know, the profile of player that he is, will be the ideal player in that midfield for Man United. You know, and as I said, I think he's someone that can go right to the very top. So when you're saying that his attributes and his engine best suit the 8, I agree. But United need to look at having a better profile and having a Bruno Fernandes in there. And the fact that we're saying that his engine and his attribute, and that's his attribute in that position, again, Man United need a lot more than that. And for me, this is why if this incoming bid for Bruno comes in, you know, United just need to be thinking smartly and think, you know, let's just move him on and get better. Really, let's be honest. But yeah, I think this season, a lot of the long balls he was doing previously, you know, he's not doing it half as much, but he still gives the ball away. And when he's needed, he hasn't really stepped up. And again, you know, I know people will get carried away because, you know, he's got hat-tricks in Europa League. He got 2 against Bilbao. But guys, we have to remember, this has been against 10 men. The last 3 games United have played in Europa League have been against 10 men. You know, and again, goals are there to be scored for when Bruno has had his opportunity. But let's just keep it in context. It has been against 10 men, because I don't believe Bruno gets the amount of goals if it's not against 10 men. So, you know, but big up anyway. So as a 10, we need a better passer who can work in tight spaces. Bruno works best when he has space, which he will have as an 8. Yeah, Bruno's better facing the game. You know, with his back to goal, you know, he's useless because again, he hasn't got the quick feet in tight spaces. His awareness in terms of having his back to goal isn't there. And those 10 positions require flair players. This is why the likes of Cunha, the likes of Eze on that left-hand side have been linked and are crucial. And this is why, again, this manager, for me, hasn't got a clue, because the fact that he can play Garnacho, who has all the attributes to be a wing-back, the fact that he can play Garnacho as a left 10 or a right 10 just shows me that he doesn't know what's going on. And the thing is as well, I don't want to hear that there's no one else, because there is. Christian Eriksen's a number 10, but you refuse to play Christian Eriksen because Garnacho has legs. But that number 10 position, you know, it's not about having legs. It's about having quality in them positions. That's why it's a number 10 position, because it's a creator's position. But he's playing Garnacho, who has the attributes of a wing back, in a creative position, which is a red flag for me, and why he needs to be sacked just because of that. You know. But again, there's loads of players that can play in the 10, but you know, the obvious ones that United have been linked to, the Cunhas and the Eze, again, these are the kind of players you want to see at the club. And if any one of them player comes in, again, Garnacho won't have any space in the team, which is why, again, he's someone that does need to be moved on. Big up to Triple M. So I Am Titanium says, if they do end up selling Garnacho, I'd like to see a big sell-on clause. I think to be fair, that's fair, if I'm honest, because the only reason I'm saying that's fair is because for some reason this player has a lot of hype, you know, and I think what would be clever if United do add on a sell-on clause, at least, you know, if he has got this hype and another team does think he's worth the transfer fee, United could get obviously something in return. But again, he's someone that I just can't understand. I just can't understand why a lot of people seem to think this guy is going right to the very top. You know, it's unbelievable, really. You know, but I would think the sell-on clause, I can see that happening. Only because, you know, the hype he's got. If someone's dumb enough to pay a lot of money for him, you know, United will be laughing. That's the only thing. But in terms of his potential, you know, I don't see no club spending 80 million on him after he's left United. You know, I think if United get 40 million for him, they've done well. But after that, I don't see. I only see his value decreasing because I don't think he's good enough. He's nowhere near good enough. You know. So Jimmy says, "Are you from France?" I'm not, even though my last name is French. Funny enough. But yeah, big up yourself. So Triple M says he's got players from 5 managers. What is he meant to do? Triple M, he's meant to coach. That's why he was brought in. Again, these comments that people are coming out with, like, I implore you to just have a think before you type it in, because you're saying he's got players from 5 managers. He was brought in because he was meant to be a good coach. Because if that was the case, then why bring him in? Like, these are the things that I don't understand. Like, he's got players from 5 managers, you know. If we look at who he starts, Onana was brought in by Ten Hag. Lenny Yoro was brought in by this regime. So that doesn't count. De Ligt, the same thing. Whoa, say brought in by Ten Hag. Left centre-back. Mazraoui was brought in under... So, whoa, if we look at Ineos's regime, yeah? Let's look at Ineos's regime, yeah? Mazraoui, De Ligt, Lenny Yoro were all brought in under Ineos's regime. Onana was brought in under Ten Hag. Ugarte was brought in under this regime. Casemiro was brought in by Ten Hag. Patrick Dorgu was brought in under this regime. Dalot was brought in under Mourinho, I believe. Was it Mourinho? Or was it Van Gaal? Mourinho or Van Gaal, I can't remember. Garnacho obviously come through the youth. Bruno was brought in by Solskjaer. Højlund was brought in by Ten Hag. So if we're looking at the core of players that he starts, yeah, you would say what? Yeah, you would say the back 3 was brought in more or less, you would say, under him. You would say under this current regime, and then you're looking at Bruno, who this fan base rate. Ugarte, who was brought under this regime. The same with Dorgu. So you're looking at only Dalot, Bruno, Garnacho's from the youth, Højlund, Casemiro, and Onana. So again, this doesn't really wash with me. And the main thing what people are not understanding is that he was brought in to coach these players. I don't care what anyone says. There's no way that Ineos thought, let's get rid of Van Nistelrooy and bring in Amorim because he's a better coach. There's no way that they thought that wasn't the case. And the matter of the fact is, he hasn't coached these players to a level, which is why he's failing. So this whole he's got players from 5 different managers, like this is just an excuse, because I guarantee you this now. If Man United weren't in 15th position in the league, there's no way people were coming out saying he's got players from 5 different managers. That's just been used as an excuse. It can't just be because he isn't doing a good job. It's now players from 5 different managers. But if roles were reversed and Man United were doing well, there's no way Triple M you'd be coming out with this. So yeah, I don't agree with that. Yeah, big up people. Make sure you smash the like button. And make sure you subscribe to my content as well if it's your first time in there. Exactly. He's going to have the majority of this squad next season. So what's going to be the excuse? Because at the end of the day, the majority of the squad that's going to be there, I can only see, I think Lindelof will go, Eriksen will go. Then we look at the likes of, and obviously Lindelof and Eriksen will go on free transfers. Then we're looking at the likes of the Mason Mounts and Luke Shaws. They should go, but I don't think they will go. Højlund, Garnacho, Bruno. These guys, as I said, I talked about already. They could be going as well. So yeah. He's going to have to work with the majority of this squad. So, again, I don't want to be seeing these excuses. At the end of the day, he hasn't done a good job. And it's as simple as that, So, Triple M says, but Bruno has saved us from relegation. Again, you see all this talk about Bruno has saved us from relegation. I mean, what a load of rubbish. Because Bruno ain't saved United from anything. He's the captain of the club. Yeah. And as the captain, you have to take the majority of the responsibility. And the fact that United find themselves in, 15th position, and let's get it right as well, he's been the most used player. When are we going to start looking at Bruno Fernandes, regardless of his numbers? Because someone like him will get numbers. Because when you're tasked with being the free kick taker, the penalty taker on every corner, playing every game, you will get numbers. But let's look at his performances, because I'd argue Bruno's only been decent for 2 months. Because before that, he was absolutely poor. But because he's got a few goals lately, people seem to be forgetting how bad he was. So yeah, there ain't too much negativity towards Bruno. Bruno just isn't as good as what a lot of people are making him out to be. And again, people think that football started before Bruno. Like, as I said, better players have left before him and better players will leave after him. Simple as that. Yeah, exactly. The manager can't identify what players should be playing in what position. You look at Kobe Mino. Kobe Mino in his system is a clear number 10. Garnacho is a clear wing-back in this system. Joshua Zirkzee is a bit of a hybrid. He can play as a 10, but he's a 9. Just play him in the 9, and build a team around Joshua Zirkzee in that sense. Ahmad can play as a wing-back and as a 10. Me, personally, I want to see Ahmad in the 10, but because of the profiles of the players that United have at the moment, he's kind of needed at the moment as a wing-back. Next season, I want to see a wing-back come in and allow Ahmad to restore to the 10. That's what I want to see if this manager is still here. Diego Dallo, his attributes are suited to being a right-sided centre-back. Bruno Fernandes, his attributes are suited to being a number 8 or a number 6. Well, I wouldn't say number 6 because he's not good in the first phase, but a number 8 as a box-to-box midfielder. Patrick Dorgu really is a left-back, but this system requires him to play as a left wing-back because they're looking at his physicality and his pace. you know. So there's a lot of things this manager is getting wrong. And Christian Eriksen is a number 10, but he's been playing they've been playing him as a number 8, as a box-to-box midfielder, when really and truly he should be playing as a 10 to get on the ball and create. You know, there's a lot of things that this manager's getting wrong for me, and this is why I'm not really backing him, if I'm honest. Yeah, big up to Blue Edits. Big up, bro. Big up for coming on. It's been a while since I came here live. Yeah, big up for coming on, man. Make sure you smash your comments in the live chat. Make sure you subscribe as well, and make sure you smash that like button as well. Big up to Ronin as well. So yeah, Mourinho got Dallo. Yeah, exactly. So Goes In is an interesting surname. Yeah, listen, I'm here to go in, man. As I said, I'm not holding back on anything. You know, as I said, this is a channel that if you want to have real footballing conversations and a no holds barred conversation, then this is a channel for it. Because as I say, man, it's about, you know, having your own opinion, which I do respect, but you know, a lot of opinions do need to be challenged, and this is what I'm here for. So Blue Edit says, let me just see. So Blue Edit says, do you agree with Mark Goldbridge? He said Amorim had others managers, players, like you said, but I think Amorim could have done a lot better, honestly. Mark Goldbridge, I've heard that name. Right, okay, is that the guy from that United stand? I think it might be. I know I don't really care what Mark Goldbridge says. Like, you know, I don't really care what he says. And he has his opinion, and I have mine. If he thinks that Amorim has had other managers, players, then fair enough. But there's no hiding the fact that Amorim has done a bad job, because you mean to tell me that he's the only manager that has had other managers' players? He isn't the only one and won't be the only one. The matter of the fact is, he hasn't done a good job with the players he has at his disposal. You know, he's playing a system that doesn't get the best out of these players. And again, he's well within his rights to play this system. But if he's not doing a good job, it's gonna fall down on him at the end of the day. And as I said, his saving grace is this Europa League, because if this Europa League was over, then no one will have a leg to stand on with Amorim, regardless if the players are not his or not. So again, everyone's free to have their own opinion. And this Mark Goldbridge guy, you know what I mean? I don't listen to him. So at the end of the day, he can have his opinion, but doesn't mean his opinion's right. So great. Blue Edit says, I miss Mourinho, man. He was great. Could have won us a league title, honestly. Yeah, to be fair, man, the only manager that I miss, apart from Sir Alex, is Louis van Gaal. I won't count Ralph Rangnick in that, because Ralph Rangnick was meant to be the director of football, not as a manager. But the only manager that I miss is Louis van Gaal. Louis van Gaal was the only manager that you can clearly see. And again, let's not forget that Louis van Gaal didn't have his own players. You know, he was dealing with players from the youth and made them better. You know, but he's the only manager that that I saw that was someone that was improving the players that he had. You know, and again, he done it with hardly any big names as well, which is what people are forgetting. I know he had like Di Maria in that, but in comparison to what other managers have got, it was nowhere near. But yeah, for me, man, Louis van Gaal was the best manager out the lot, for sure. Guys, just bear me 1 minute, guys. Bear me 1 minute. So yeah, as I said, yeah, Mourinho, for me, in the end, I needed him to go, because just like Solskjaer, just like Ten Hag, it come to a point where these managers are just sabotaging the club, you know, whether it's the press conferences, whether it's his team selection, you know. I mean, Mourinho, yeah, won a couple of trophies, but his football was an absolute joke, you know. But to think now that we've seen Ten Hag and now Amorim, to say that Mourinho's football was probably better than both of them managers, I would never have said that in the past, you know. But that's what's happened, because Amorim's football has been nothing short of a disgrace, and I couldn't wait till Ten Hag went. But I'll have to say Ten Hag is doing a better job, or had done a better job, and his football was more entertaining than what Amorim's is, and I never thought I'd be saying that. Ronan says our failure has a lot to do with we have players who fit different styles of play. Squad has to align with manager's philosophy, then we'll start winning games. Again, this is big up Ronan for coming on anyway. But what I would say, that's a load of nonsense, really. The philosophy doesn't have to fit them. The philosophy of the philosophy doesn't have to fit the managers. The philosophy has to fit the club. You know what I mean? Because the problem that Man United have been doing over the last few years is buying players for the manager. That should never be done, because the manager comes and goes, you know. The philosophy should be built on the club. Look at Barcelona, for instance. Barcelona's philosophy is to include certain players into their first team, which is why they keep churning out player after player. Man United's philosophy at the moment is, and has been over the years, is getting athletes more than getting pure football players. Because to think that Man United have forced out the likes of Anthony Martial, Jadon Sancho, Paul Pogba, Donny van der Beek, who else is there? Even a Juan Mata. There's been loads of players that have been forced out that are either actually pure footballers or just better footballers than what is currently at the club. But this fan base and the club, their philosophy is to buy players for the manager, and a lot of the players that these managers of late have been buying have been more on the athlete side more than actual footballers. And I'm hoping that Ineos are coming here to just change this, because this has been a massive problem for the football club. So yeah, it's not about aligning the squad with the manager's philosophy. The philosophy has to be the club's philosophy. You don't see Barcelona saying to Hansi Flick, go and buy, I don't know, someone like I'm trying to think of a player, like an Adama Traore, who's not a technician. He's more of an athlete. That ain't gonna happen, is it? Because the club's philosophy, are the likes of your Lamine Yamals, your Pedris, players, Frankie de Jongs, players of that ilk that are just pure football players, And Hansi Flick, the players he brings in are going to be players of that ilk. So it's not the philosophy of the manager, it's the philosophy of the club. But big up yourself anyway. Amorim said this is the worst Man United side in history, but indirectly, he's criticising himself. He's the coach, so he should have done a lot better. Yeah, listen, do I believe it's the worst Man United side in history? I don't know, if I'm honest with you. I mean, if there's anyone that knows other teams from the past that you can put into the live chat. But what I would say is that this club does lack a lot of, this squad does lack a lot of quality, but they're not as bad as what people think they are, in my opinion. I think this manager should be getting a lot better out of the players at his disposal. And the fact that he's not, again, it's because he's failed, because he's meant to be a top young coach, and he hasn't coached anything. So I don't think these players are the worst. I wouldn't say, I think collectively they are, but individually I wouldn't say that they're the worst that United have had, But as a whole, he hasn't got anything out of these players really, and he has to be looked at for sure. So yeah, if you look at the players Van Gaal was given in hindsight, he worked a miracle with what he was given, 100%. Tyler Blackett, Cameron Borthwick-Jackson, Paddy McNair, a young Martial, Rashford coming through the youth as well. Di Maria. I mean, there's players that, as I said, that there were players that were unheard of. There's probably more that I've forgotten. If anyone remembers the right back, what was his name? From the youth, I forgot his name. That's gonna bug me now. I had his name in my head. Yeah, it's left my mind. Oh, Guillermo Varela. If anyone remembers Guillermo Varela, Timothy Fosu Mensah as well. You know, Van Gaal just made these players better because it was coaching. And that's what I'm trying to say to you. This manager has no excuse because he's got better players collectively at his disposal than what Van Gaal was bringing through the youth. But he isn't doing a good job with his players. So that's why this whole he needs his own players crap doesn't work for me. Exactly. Well, I mean, Mourinho was given a fair few players, to be fair, but LVG wasn't backed. I think that's the one we need to be looking at. Gamer says Anelka or Dimitar Berbatov. That's tough. I mean, two different kind of players, really. What I would say is that, because obviously Anelka was at Arsenal before Henry came through. Anelka was devastating when he come onto the scene. Dimitar Berbatov, in terms of his elegance and his touch, for me, yeah, he was a great player, man. I can't really pick because they're not really, even though they're both strikers, but they're not really like for like, you know. I'll probably say Berbatov because Berbatov's style of play is what I liked, you know. But Anelka was an absolute problem at Arsenal, you know. Prime Falcao or Prime Cavani? That's easy for me. Falcao. I think Falcao was a top player, man. Falcao, you know, his variety of finishing. Cavani at Napoli, to be fair. I preferred Cavani at Napoli. He was deadly at Napoli. PSG, again, he scored goals. But at Napoli, he was devastating. But Falcao for me, man. I think Falcao at one point was the best striker in the world when he was at Atletico Madrid. So that's an easy one for me. Oh, God. Gamer, you've done it, man. Adriano or Samuel Eto'o? You know what? Samuel Eto'o, for me, doesn't get the respect he deserves. You know, I think in terms of his goal scoring, you know, in terms of his big match experience, in terms of coming alive in the big games and the career he's had. You know, this is a guy that come from Real Madrid. Obviously went to Barcelona and then obviously Inter Milan, Chelsea. The career he's had was great. But for me, Adriano was one of my favourite strikers. If anyone remembers the old Football Managers, when it was called Championship Manager, you know, Adriano, I used to buy him every season. If I was Man United, I'll just sign. Adriano was the first player that I signed, number 10 on his back, and he was the best striker in the game, man. He was ridiculous, you know. Again, if anyone's played the International Superstar Soccer Pros, you know, Pro Evos, Adriano, Ibrahimovic at Inter Milan, they were illegal. Two of the same players, but one was left-footed, one was right-footed. So, yeah, when it comes to Adriano, for me, I very rarely put any striker above Adriano. The only striker I put above Adriano, for me, is R9. And then the ones that are comparable, the likes of Ibrahimovic, Batistuta, Benzema, you know, one of the favourites of mine as well. But when it comes to Adriano, that guy should have been, you know, he should have gone on to been, you know, one of the GOATs of the game. But obviously, if anyone knows his career, I think once his dad passed away, I think he kind of went off the rails, you know, which is a shame because he was devastating at Inter Milan. You know, obviously his career, I think he started off at Parma. I think he was co-owned with Parma. And I think he was co-owned with Parma and Fiorentina, I think, before he obviously was permanently at Inter Milan. And yeah, he was devastating. One of my favourite strikers, you know, left-footed as well. Guy had everything. Strength, pace, technique. You know, his shooting was an absolute joke. He could pass as well. He could dribble. You know, he was aggressive, good in the air. There wasn't not one weakness to his game. The best way to describe Adriano for me is that he was R9 but left-footed. You know, and R9 for me is the GOAT in terms of strikers, but Adriano for me should have been in that conversation because he was that good for me, you know. But big up. Dallo can't be a starter. Yeah, I agree. I think if United get a bid for Dallo in the summer, they need to take that for me, 100%. You know, no questions asked. So Evedra says, sorry, I says, I am titanium, agreed. Same with Maguire, Dorgu, and Mainu. Big up to Chantel Rose. So Mainu is a brilliant player. If you have the right players around him. Okay. So Blue Edit says, who's your must start for the Europa League final? I'm glad we got Spurs. We know them. So if I'm picking the definite starters for United in the Europa League final, from the current available players, for me, Lenny Yoro, Mazraoui, De Ligt, Casemiro, Amad Diallo. Them guys there for me are definite starters. And obviously Xerxes, no point mentioning him. Obviously he's out for the season. The same with a few of the others. But if I'm picking from what's available, you know, and again, De Ligt, well, if De Ligt's back anyway, you know, I think he might be back. So if De Ligt is back for the final, but if we're assuming that he's not back, then for me, the definite starters are Mazraoui, Yoro, Amad and Casemiro. They're the definite starters for me. Nah, listen. The people that say LVG bored them to death, I'm sorry, man. It's because you're too impatient. You know, football's not about just going from back to front quickly, you know. If you watch the way that LVG, you know, his build-up play, you know, every player knew what position to take up when they received the ball. And you're forgetting as well that he was doing it without money really being spent. So you have to give him his credit, you know. And I think as well, when people talk about philosophy, his philosophy was working. You know, he had the under-23s or the reserve team, whatever they were at the time, playing in the same way. So he was building something for the long term, you know, where if you're going to pluck a player from the 23s or the reserve, they would go straight into the first team, and it would be a seamless transition. And he was building these kind of things, Van Gaal. But this fan base were too impatient. And then when Van Gaal went, you see the trouble United have had now since Van Gaal. Mourinho, Solskjaer, Ten Hag, and now Amorim. You know, and I'd arguably say all that football that them managers have played have been a lot worse or a lot more boring than what LVG was doing. So yeah, LVG just needed time. Yeah, Blue Edits, I'm glad you come up with this because Zidane's always been my main choice. But again, Zidane, you know, is a bit of a different case because the reputation that he's got from playing and managing, he isn't going to want to tarnish that. So, you know, and him coming to Man United, you know, he'll be put on the back foot because this team just doesn't have anywhere near the caliber of players or are in the right state that what Zidane would risk. But he's always been my first choice, Zidane. I wanted him before United got Mourinho. So when LVG was sacked, he was the next one. But yeah, I'm not sure where Zizou goes from here on now, to be honest with you, because he's been at the game for a little while now. Maybe he wants that France job that has been reported, and he should get that really. Guys, I'm just gonna go through a few more chats before we wrap. But big up to everyone for coming on, as I said. And guys, if it's your first time on there, you know, or if you're on there, make sure you smash that like button. It's only one click of the button. Helps the channel to reach more people. And again, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you do. And check out my other content as well. And guys, I'm going to be back, obviously, at 10 o'clock after the Man United and Athletic Bilbao Europa League game. Xavier says, yeah, Brandon Williams. I'm glad you brought that name up because I remember having not a conversation. I was having a debate with someone on Twitter about Brandon Williams. So when Brandon Williams was coming through, when he benched Luke Shaw because Luke Shaw wasn't doing his job, you could see Brandon Williams was only included because Brandon Williams was, you know, he was a passion merchant. Let's be honest, you know. Blood, sweat and tears, but no quality. And when Brandon Williams first came through, before I see him play, I actually thought he was left-footed, playing at left-back. But again, when I see the way that he was playing, obviously he was right-footed, and he had no quality. He just had a lot of passion. And I remember when on Twitter, I had someone had the cheek to tell me that Brandon Williams was the next Dennis Irwin. And again, this guy clearly didn't see Dennis Irwin play, and clearly doesn't understand Dennis Irwin's level that he was at and Brandon Williams' level. Because to say that Brandon Williams was going to be the next Dennis Irwin, again, a statement that should never be made. And look how that's turned out for Brandon Williams. You know, he was only in this Man United squad because, again, Luke Shaw couldn't stay fit and Luke Shaw was a liability. But the thing that this guy actually told me that Brandon Williams is the next Dennis Irwin, he couldn't be further from the truth, man. So, and look how it's turned out for him now. Yeah. Yeah, listen, Bilal, I am Titanium, sorry, man, big up. Yeah, Etu on FIFA was an absolute problem. I mean, I used to play a friend at FIFA, and he was always Inter Milan. And that front two of Etu and Diego Militao used to cause problems. With Stankovic in the 10, used to cause absolute problems for me, you know? So, yeah, Etu on FIFA was an absolute joke, man. Even on Pro Evo, should I say. So International Superstar Soccer Pro was one of the first best football games I played in Pro Evo Soccer with Adrian on the cover. Yeah, listen, that was the times, man. That was the times. Pro Evo now, obviously it's called something else. I think it's called Is it called eFootball? Yeah, I can't play that no more. But if anyone knows Pro Evo, International Superstar Soccer Pro, if anyone knows the Master Leagues as well, you know, with the Castellos, the Mirandas, the Birchills, you know, those were the times. But obviously now, you know what I mean, it's a bit different. Big up to Rahu Maveda. So Ronan says, Man United as a club lacks a core footballing philosophy, constantly changing managers with contrasting styles. Hope we could learn from Liverpool. Hopefully Ineos will guide us in that right path. Listen, I 100% agree with that, Ronan. As I said, Man United throughout the years, you know, they've let Ferguson do his job. You know, Ferguson was doing everything at the club. And then when you get a Louis Van Gaal in, Van Gaal was trying to build this. And people were too impatient with Van Gaal. And they wanted a quick fix. But, you know, if you could see what Van Gaal was building, you would see that, you know, he was playing football the right way. And he was doing it without any signings, really. And then, obviously, people were impatient. He got sacked. And again, this is why United find themselves in the position they are in now. Because since he's gone, there hasn't been not one manager that I would say, yep, they actually get it, you know. And for me, unfortunately, Amorim is the same as those other managers. I ain't forgetting the boring 0-0 draws. You know, look at the bigger picture. Look at the bigger picture. Look what he was building, and you have to look at he didn't have half of the players that a lot of these managers are getting now. So you have to look at these things. He never had a Paul Pogba, you know. He had a young Anthony Martial as well. He never had a Ibrahimovic, you know. He never had a Casemiro, a Lenny Yoro. He never had these players. The guy was dealing with players like Borthwick Jackson and what's his name? Tyler Blackett and these kind of players, and Varela. And look where these guys are now. I don't even know where they're playing. So these things have to be taken into context. So MME Edit says, score for tonight, prediction, Bilbao, Man United. So I'm going to say, I don't know. It depends. If he goes with an attacking lineup, I think United might go on the front foot and, you know, I say a 2-1 United if they go on the front foot. If he goes with a defensive lineup and invites the pressure, I think Bilbao could win the game. But I think 3-0 might be a bit of a stretch for them to get back into, especially being away from home. So I'm not sure what the score is going to be tonight because it's based on a lot of variables. But I'm going to say United go through because there's no way United lose a 3-0 lead at home in the semi-final. I just can't see it happening. And again, if he does, we will be here for it. Yeah, Kobe's not the next Scholes. He's nowhere near Scholes. He's not even that type of player anyway. Kobe's a very good player, but again, this club, the manager is not doing him. The manager is doing him a disservice. Let's be honest, because Kobe's a very good player, but he has to be playing in the right position. You know, just looking at the way he plays in this system, you know he's not a number 6 or number 8 in this system. He's not. He's a number 10. You know, some of the things he does will just tell you that. You know, and again, let's not forget Kobe played as a 9 or a 10 in the youth. So yeah. So yeah, Inter Milan still chasing the title. I think Napoli are ahead at the moment. So Inter still have the chance to do a double. PSG have the chance to go and do a treble. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting final. But I think what's good for PSG is that PSG can rest all their players, because that league title's done. They've got the French Cup final, I think, as well coming up, I believe. But they can rest their players and just focus on this Champions League, which they've been looking forward to for a while, you know. So yeah, big up to CO1396. Can see Bilbao winning. I hope not, but as I said, for me, I think that if United go on the attacking, if they go on the front foot, then they should see the game. They should see the game over the line. But who knows what Amorim's going to do, man, because, as I said, he's unpredictable in terms of his team, his lineup. But United should have enough to get over the line for me. But, guys, listen up. Big up for everyone coming on, as I said. So we've been going for, what, just about an hour and a half. As I said, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you do. And make sure you smash the like button as well. We've got 11 likes in there, guys. Big up everyone for coming in. Big up for everyone's comments as well. And as I said, guys, you know what I mean? We're not going to agree on everything, but it's the dialogue that I enjoy. And as I said, you know, as long as it's respectful, you know, I welcome everyone's comments in the chat. Big up to CO1396 for subscribing. Yeah, big up, man. Guys, as I said, I will be back at 10 o'clock tonight, obviously doing the reaction to the Man United and Athletic Bilbao game. So, yeah, make sure you come back through. And as I said, big up everyone for coming on again and contributing to the channel. Before we go, Ronan said, true decline started when David Gill left our club. We can't build a squad with Ed Woodward, Richard Arnold or John Murto. Management and experts to win any major trophies. Man United will continue winning trophies. Maybe not the major ones under this regime. But again, the main thing is Amorim doing a good job with what he's got? And the question is no. Hopefully Ineos can have a look in the summer and do what's best for the club, because again, there can be big decisions to be made in the summer, and whether that happens, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, guys, big up for coming on, and I'll catch you guys at 10 o'clock tonight. Make sure your notifications are on. Big up yourselves, and take it easy. Later.